First Contact learning experience. I'm Vera Houle, Director of Community Relations for APTN. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the territories we reside on. While we are meeting in a virtual capacity today, we would like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous lands on which we are grateful to live, work, and play. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this nation home. We must reaffirm our commitment to improving relationships between nations and respecting local Indigenous peoples and cultures. Miigwech. Joining me today is our Youth Ambassador, Taylor Galvin. From Broken Head Ojibwe Nation in Treaty 1 territory. She is a student at the University of Manitoba seeking a Bachelor of Environmental Studies with a focus on wildlife biology.
Yep, that's me. Thank
Very
you.
nice.
Miigwech for having me.
Thank you. In addition, joining us via Zoom is our elder, Belinda Vandenbroek. She is from OCN near La Pas, Manitoba. She was born and raised on her home reserve, Big Eddy, until she left for residential school in 1957. At age 45, Belinda went to university and received her Bachelor of Arts in Native Studies and Psychology. Her passion today is helping people in their healing journey. But before we go any further, Belinda will start us off with a blessing. Belinda.
Thank you very much, Vera.
Hello, everybody. I first want to welcome everyone that's on this Zoom meeting this day. I've been asked to say the opening prayers for this gathering, and I'm very honored to do that. I do want to say that I first want to honor the 500 tribes in North America that were here before contact, and to honor my ancestors as well. I want to say that I would like to begin by saying my prayers for this gathering. And I will say it first in my Inuit language, which you know is Cree, and then I will translate into the English way. Kinanaskumid nana nuskagi sigagnu patsuinana. Kinanaskumid nan minagaginoge gon kaminia, taskit matisiag, quest of matisiag. Questa tutta mag, te say what is yag, the witchy to act the sagi to act semen to. The Pagostani mitnan mina gisemen to the baby tap mitego in the name of Gutabi Mamo Pchigio Pag. Questa mamma to any tag, quest the two tag matsiniwa. Kinanas commitnan gisemen to Vaginoge on Caminian Dusky. Creator, we give thanks today. We give thanks for our lives. We give thanks for everything that you give us here on earth. We give thanks for the life that we have here today, that we can be with family and friends, and to honor all our ancestors. And we ask you, Creator, to come and sit with the people that are going to be on this call tomorrow, to be with them and to sit with them. And that we will all remember that we are together in this world to live together, and that we live our lives in a good way, a loving way, a kind way, and a generous way. And for everything that you give us here on earth, Creator, we give thanks. How can I ask midna? Dan.
Miigwech, Belinda. On behalf of APTN, I would like to welcome the members of PIPSC, the Professional Institute of the Public Service of Canada, which is the largest multi-professional labor union in Canada and represents some 60,000 members from coast to coast to coast. Welcome. Before we begin today's events, we also have greetings from someone I'm sure many of you are familiar with, Greg Schreiber, also known as Wolfstar. Miigwech, who is your Indigenous representative.
Niwin Miigwech, thank you very much, Vera, for the wonderful welcome. And I'd also like to welcome our guests, Elder Belinda and our youth Taylor. Yes, my Indigenous name is Wolfstar, and I'm a member of the Turtle clan and proud Mohawk from Kahnawake in Quebec. And as you said, on behalf of our over 60,000 members from PIPS from coast to coast to coast, we are grateful for the generations of people who were the custodians of this land for thousands of years. The Institute is the largest Canadian union in Canada, representing scientists, professionals employed at the federal government and some provincial and territorial levels of government. Long before today, as we have gathered here, there have been Indigenous people who have been the stewards of this land. In particular, we acknowledge that the PIPS national office in Ottawa and where I am located is on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. As settlers, this recognition of the contribution is a historic importance for Indigenous people, and we must also be clearly and overtly connected to our collective commitment to make a promise and challenge as we all embark on a path of truth and reconciliation within the Institute and in our own communities. Today, we will be taking a step forward on this path of truth and reconciliation. We will have a better understanding of some of the Indigenous issues and culture by watching the video from the APTN First Contact series. The First Contact show takes 6 Canadians on a journey intended to challenge their attitudes and shed light on a better understanding on true Indigenous experience. At the beginning of our webinars, as you all know, we like to provide you with our equity statement, which has clearly outlined our expectation from participants. You can take a few moments to review this statement as a link is being shared in the chat box. As noted, the Professional Institute of Public Service of Canada strives to create a climate that is respectful, safe, and inclusive, where we all feel welcome and valued, and where we are supported to make our contribution and support others to make theirs. We thank you for being part of this inclusive space. Just before we get started, I'd like to go over some technical details of the webinar so that everybody can participate in today's session. Audio, as you can realize, is that the audio feed is being provided through the APTN studios. We've reduced the background noise to ensure that the quality of sound, so all of the participants are muted. If you would like to introduce yourself, make a comment, or connect with others, you can open up the chat in the Zoom. Zoom chat functions. The chat is accessible and controlled at the bottom of the location of your screen. And when you click on the chat window, it will appear. Visually, in the center of your screen, you should clearly be seeing me. Later in this session, APTL will be broadcasting a Zoom through the Zoom platform. The video should be pinned to the center of your screen. Please note that your internet connection can impact the speed and sound quality of the video if you're working from a weak wireless connection or starting a connection with multiple users. Translation, as mentioned, is in the invitation today. You have a choice of either English or French. You can choose the translation through the Zoom connection at the bottom. After the video of the screening, we will be hosting a Q&A session. The Q&A session will be facilitated using the Q&A tool in Zoom. So it's beside the chat button, but you'll have select a Q&A type and type in your question in the box and press enter. Our PIP staff, Malcolm and Shelley, will be monitoring the Q&A and the chat box throughout the session. So if you have any issues, please don't hesitate to send them a message. Just before we get started, if anybody has any questions, you can certainly ask those in the chat. Smoke, air, fire, and earth, I release all energies that no longer serve me, all negativities that surround me, and all fears that limit me. So it is that I cleanse, dismiss, dispel. I send all negative energies away into the light and welcome positive energies into the session with APTN. I thank the Creator and Mother Earth for these sacred medicines and the cleansing power they possess. Miwin, miigwech, merci. Thank you. I now turn it back over to Vera in the APTN studio. And as they say, let the show begin.
Miigwech, Stone Wolf, that was absolutely beautiful. In a moment, as you were told, we will begin watching episode 2, season 2 of First Contact, followed by the Q&A. With you and our panelists, please remember, post your questions in the Q&A section of your Zoom window. The show is approximately 46 minutes long, and throughout the show, you may have questions, and we are more than happy to be a part of the conversation and answer any questions you may have. And after the show, we'll come back and have a conversation. And with the help of all three of us and along with yourselves, we will begin our road on the journey to reconciliation. Miigwech, enjoy the show.
What do some Canadians really think about Indigenous people?
We're wasting money on them. They got to start helping themselves.
You do see a lot of poverty.
There's just squalor in shanty towns.
You're just thinking that we're out breaking in and doing drugs. Well, you are.
I don't think I've met anyone who may be Aboriginal.
Like all you hear is, oh, it's the white man's fault.
Don't be mad at us.
The card of racism is played a lot, and I think it's overused.
I think it's time to quit playing the victim.
Get over it. Stop whining about it.
For heaven's sakes, it's been over 150 years. Get your shit together.
The second you mention anything, you're a racist.
Few Canadians have ever taken the time to get to know Indigenous people or spend time in their communities. This group represents those Canadians. They've agreed to leave their everyday lives behind and embark on a unique journey deep into Indigenous communities across Canada.
So your journey starts here and it starts today.
Brendan, first-generation immigrant.
Why are you blaming me for problems? I didn't create these problems.
Suburbanite Samantha.
I'm sad to say, but I actually am not familiar with Indigenous communities at all.
Stephanie, mother of 5.
Kind of upset me when there's these perks given to people that don't necessarily use them.
Rory, former corrections officer.
Still playing the victim from their great grandparents. It's bullshit.
Jackson, student.
We have to look at some of these past events, even though they were horrific. It's time to move on.
Larry, wholesale manager.
Like only white people can be racist? It seems to be all the rules they make in this country now are against me.
On the first leg of their journey, the 6 participants saw their country in a whole new light.
Right, we've been misunderstood for 400 years. That kind of weighs heavy on the people.
Then they had their views challenged about one of the most controversial conflicts in Canadian history.
We never imagined in any way, shape, or form that we would be shot at.
And a visit to an Innu community in northern Labrador hit them in their hearts.
You cannot put a judgment on any culture that you know nothing about.
Next, the 6 hit the front lines in a city plagued with a racial divide.
The racism in Thunder Bay is beyond imaginable.
Allowing for a secret to finally be revealed.
I have my Métis status.
I'm kind of shocked. I had no idea.
And a dark walk through history forces the group to face a truth few believed possible.
Did any of the staff ever call out about this? Or?
No, they encouraged it.
It's crazy.
I never thought it was this bad. Not even close.
The group's time in Natwashish is up. The next leg of their journey is over 2,000 kilometers away in Thunder Bay. With over 100,000 residents, Thunder Bay is the largest urban center in northwestern Ontario. It's a major hub for people living in Indigenous communities across the region. They travel here for schooling, medical treatment, and other services. Coming from remote reserves, the city can be alluring, but it can also be dangerous. Addictions, gangs, and homelessness are prevalent. Driving in, Samantha takes notice.
There's obviously looks like a lot of either homeless or people on drugs. Basically, everyone here seems Indigenous, or at least a huge part of the population.
Larry and Lori are immediately put off.
Like this group on the left here, they look like they're half the bag.
Oh, here we go. That sounds so bad. Here we go.
But the travelers are about to have these attitudes challenged, and it makes them nervous.
We're at a shelter.
See what was on the building?
No way.
Yeah, I didn't.
This is a shelter.
Was it a shelter?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know what to expect with that.
The 6 are going to Shelter House, a low-barrier shelter in the heart of the downtown core. It's open to anyone under the influence of drugs or alcohol, but 3 out of every 4 clients are Indigenous.
Hi, I'm Michelle Jordan. I'm the executive
Originally from Pays Plat First Nation, Michelle Jordan is Shelter House's executive director. She explains why their role here is vital.
There's a shortage of housing in Thunder Bay, affordable housing. They don't want to rent to people that are Indigenous in the city, and it's very apparent. I mean, they'll tell people right off the bat, like, you're Native, we don't want you here. I've had people come here and say, please don't send your people here to find housing because we don't want to house them. If you have an Indigenous last name, it's very difficult to find housing. It's difficult to find a job. And when you are born on a reserve and you live on a reserve, you grow up, there's no jobs for you to get. So when they come here, it's kind of a culture shock. They don't really know how to navigate Thunder Bay.
So there's high racial tension in Thunder Bay.
Very high racial tension. I mean, and it's really disheartening because it hasn't really changed a lot. If anything, it's probably gotten worse.
Over the past 20 years, Thunder Bay's Indigenous community has experienced several tragedies, including the largely unsolved deaths of 7 teenagers while here to attend high school. More recently, a former shelter house client named Barbara Kentner was the victim of a deadly assault.
She used to stay here. She was, someone that we knew, and it's unfortunate. I think they thought she was a prostitute, and so they threw a trailer hitch at her as a joke, and they said, I got one, and she died from her injuries. That's the attitudes here, and that's a young guy. Like, he's only 18 years old. So where did he pick up that stuff from? Probably from home. So what kind of things are we teaching our kids?
Combating these attitudes motivates Michelle and her team to affect change in her divided community.
We know why addiction happens. We know why people are homeless, and we know that they're here to get help. So let's provide that help for them and try to do the best we can. And that's really what we're trying to do.
Thank you.
Next, the participants are invited to roll up their sleeves and help out in the shelter.
There you go.
No problem.
It gives them a chance to meet some of the clients.
This is Russell. He's one of our residents.
How you doing?
Hailing from White Dog First Nation, Russell suffers from a brain injury and FASD, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. But here, he's found a way to cope with his issues.
Having fetal alcohol spectrum disorder is a very tough thing to go through at my age because I'm a little bit behind. But I keep trying, and artwork gives me a bit of serenity that a lot of people don't really have. I'm depressed a lot of the time, so painting helps me to stop that depression. It helps me to focus on the positive aspect of life.
Having a place to pursue his passion has been key in helping Russell stay healthy and safe.
The other people who've had maybe similar past as you, if they don't have this place, what do you think will become of them?
Like for me, it would be either jail or I'd be dead. My mom and dad had a violent history. My dad shot my mom with a .308 when I was 3 years old. And my dad did 9 years in Stony, and then he killed my Uncle John, did 15 more years in Melhaven. But after he came home, he died, basically he froze to death in a house after his friends left him, and he had a whiskey bottle in his hand, frozen. So how do I feel about my family history? I feel messed up. I feel like it's changed me in a lot of ways, but the artwork is what I believe in, and that gives me a bit of hope and love and peace. That's all I hope for.
SOS, Tessa speaking.
At day's end, the 6 each get a ride along in Shelter House's new SOS van, a community outreach vehicle offering transportation and support to those on the streets. Volunteers Josie and Tessa are on the front lines.
It's pretty horrific for our clients who are trying to get themselves better. The racism in Thunder Bay is beyond imaginable. Hey, how you doing? It's the SOS team. It's Tessa and Josie.
Hey.
Hey.
You take me home?
Yeah, we'll take you home.
Yep.
Here.
Over the course of several hours, the calls are nonstop.
This is Larry.
Hi,
Hi,
Larry.
Keisha, how are you?
Do you have family members here?
I never had a good life.
Having a chance to meet people on the streets leaves a vastly different impression than their initial feelings driving in.
Be safe, Robert. I'll talk to you later, bro. Bye, Robert.
For Brennan, today's experience has been eye-opening.
Once you start talking to people, you get an idea of who they are as a person and what brought them to that. You can have some humanity instead of just always looking at them as just nothing.
Tonight's final ride-along goes to Jackson.
So what do you know about Thunder Bay, Jackson?
I have a few friends who moved from Thunder Bay. One guy I grew up with. It's a bit of a rough town, from what I've heard.
Being here makes Jackson uneasy. He still perceives the homeless community as dangerous.
When I was 14, I was standing out front of the library and I almost got my ass kicked. Just some drunk who decided that he didn't like the look of me, I guess. So yeah, you know what? I do have my skepticisms about trusting the homeless community.
The next pickup is a client named Beth. She's one of many young Indigenous women trying to make a life here.
I don't think we've ever met before.
No?
No?
Yeah, this is my second time getting a ride.
Really?
Yeah.
How old are you, sweetie?
I'm 20.
Beth has suffered a fall. They're taking her to a hospital for treatment.
How long have you been in Thunder Bay?
I've been here since June, the end of June, on the 28th. I think we got here.
Yeah, and where were you before that?
Airline First Nation, that's where I'm from.
How far is that from here?
4 hours. Had to walk out of my house.
Did you say you walked from your reserve?
Yeah, I had to hitchhike. That was not good.
Like Jackson, Beth has plans for the future. She's working towards a career.
Try to be a cook too.
Yeah?
Yeah. I have my safety food handling and all that. I just have to get my diploma first.
What makes you want to be a cook?
Because I love food.
But as they pass through one of Thunder Bay's rougher areas, the conversation turns to the darker reality facing young Indigenous women like Beth.
Have you guys checked out Limerick? Yeah, there's like a lot of bad people there. I even lost the phone there. Canada Day, I was raped. It was by my ex too. Yeah, he followed me from my residence. He took me to a bike trail. It was a rough day for me. Canada Day night. I didn't even get to enjoy Canada Day.
Beth's sole concern right now is getting home safely.
Wish someone would come with me to the emergency.
Well, I can drop you off, but I can't stay.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
That's okay. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just worried, like, it's a long walk back if I would have to walk back.
Well, if it's before 1:30, we can get your ride back, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, Miss Beth. It's good to meet you.
As Beth exits the vehicle, Jackson is left uncharacteristically silent.
This one's a tough one. And I had nothing to say. What I'm taking away from this is an idea of not judging. If I passed Beth on the street, I probably would have just kept my head down, ignored that she was there, and hoped that she didn't bother me. She was so nice and forward and everything. To be able to talk about something so painful and so devastating, it really puts what you consider devastating in check.
Day 2 in Thunder Bay. The 6 participants leave the downtown core and travel to a nearby Indigenous community, Fort William First Nation. But even before getting there, Larry's mind is made up about what they're about to see.
I think it'll follow my stereotypical point of view on a reserve where it'll be abandoned cars and houses will be in disrepair. They didn't have to work for it, so, well, it's broken, let the government fix it.
Lori echoes Larry's opinion.
Same idea, litter everywhere, dirty diapers everywhere, smashed windows, and reserve dogs. That's just what I see up north.
But they're about to eat their words.
Holy. I see nice houses, I see green grass.
It seems like a thriving community with successful businesses.
Holy shit, they've got beautiful houses. Nice store, no broken windows. That sounds so bad. Eh?
Why?
Well, because it makes me sound and look like a racist. But you know, that's what I see and what I've experienced. So my assumption is that way. So it's good to see a different side.
Fort William First Nation is an Ojibwe reserve south of Thunder Bay. Several successful Indigenous-run businesses and corporate head offices are located in the community's business park. Ed Collins, Fort William Economic Development Manager, explains.
A lot of First Nations say that Fort First Nation is the hub of Northwest America because we have a lot of people come here. And with Indian Northern Affairs Canada stationed on a reserve, almost 85 communities utilize their services on First Nation. So a lot of them come out here.
So would you say that your community is pretty self-sustaining then? Like, if
Oh, definitely. Actually, again, if you look over straight ahead, it looks like water over there, but we have a 10 megawatt solar project, about 88 acres of solar panels as well.
Oh, yeah, it does.
Yeah. It looks like a river. Actually, it looks like a lake.
Yeah, it looks like a lake.
Yeah.
But in spite of their success, Fort William residents deal with the same stigma facing Thunder Bay's Indigenous homeless community.
See, how we figure too, whatever happens in Fort First Nation affects the city of Thunder Bay. We built our powwow grounds, and some people from the city of Thunder Bay, they came up here and they went in the middle of our powwow grounds and destroyed it. They don't understand that our powwow grounds are very sacred to First Nations. It's like a church.
The kind of prejudices or the racism is more the younger generation, or is that the older people?
I used to think it was just the older people because they're set in their ways. But for me growing up, I've seen it. I have a son that's 26, a daughter that's 21. They've seen it from their age groups as well. So I was kind of saddened to hear that.
Ed walks the Sixth over to an area where the community built teepees and fire pits for all Thunder Bay residents to use and enjoy.
We had 3 of them here. They burnt them all down. We rebuilt them. A couple of weeks later, they once again burnt them all down. I don't know if you know anything about building a wigwam or a teepee, but it takes a lot of time. It's a lot of roots from the trees. It's a lot of birch bark. So when it gets burnt down or torn apart, it's a little heartbreaking, a lot of discouraging for us.
Ed's had to find a way to rise above those attitudes.
But I can't get angry, you know what? Because if you have hatred for me, and that bothers me, that keeps me up at night, it's not bothering you. You're sleeping like a baby at nighttime. The only one it's bothering is me. So why worry about it? Why worry that you hate me, or there's anger, or there's hatred, or I just keep on moving forward.
The Six split up to explore the community and meet some of the people that live here.
Hello.
Welcome to the Fort William Reserve and my residence.
Brennan, Lori, and Larry head to Len Peltier's house, one of the well-kept homes they noted driving in.
So it's beautiful back here.
It is very nice back here.
They're treated to a wild game dinner harvested by Len himself.
We got pickerel, salad, potatoes. If you want moose sausages, there's moose sausages.
Hi, how are you?
Meanwhile, Stephanie, Jackson, and Samantha traveled to a different part of the reserve to spend the night with Stephanie McLaurin and her partner Mitch.
Oh, this is beautiful.
Thank you.
Is it your home or a cabin, or is it?
This is our home.
Tonight, takeout is on the menu.
Oh, they look good.
That looks so good.
But it's the conversation after dinner that is the real main course.
So my experience was living in an extremely racist city as a visibly Indigenous woman, experiencing several incidents of racism over my life. And it was like very clear while it was happening that it was because I was an Indian.
Stephanie is an activist working towards a degree in Indigenous governance. She's helping heal her community after decades of racism.
One of my things I've been working on is looking at internalized oppression and overcoming internalized oppression and what that looks like. And through that research, one of the last statements I was left with, that internalized oppression may be one of the biggest challenges Indigenous people have to face. That's what's missing with the racism discussion, just how it's taken in. And then I produce that belief in myself.
Through her studies, Stephanie's traced this issue back to the start of Confederation.
Under the Indian Act in Canada, we're not actually human. That's what the Indian Act does. It serves to dehumanize us. It's creating a certain class of citizens. So me not believing in myself and having these awful views about being an Indian, that's by design. I was designed to feel that way. And I'm breaking the design by saying, no, that's not the truth. I'm not a dirty Indian. My value isn't less than. I don't learn differently than
You're
other
not some
people.
drunk.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're branded drunks and like, you know, on workers, you know, we don't work.
Lazy.
Yeah, we're on welfare all the time. Like,
I can tell that makes you really angry.
it does. It really does. Even like trying to get jobs, you have to prove that you're really hard work. You can be like treated the way everyone else is being treated. Like it's twice. It's hard.
The conversation resonates with participant Stephanie. She is secretly struggling with her own newfound Indigenous heritage.
I've recently found out that I have a Métis ancestry. Prior to that, I just assumed that I was European.
There was a time when I couldn't even talk about this, never mind even like trying to like put that out there for other people to consider. I had a lot of shame for a long time about being Indigenous. I had a lot of internalized racism, oppression. I didn't believe that I could go to school. So I had a lot to unpack, and I think that is a common thing for Indigenous people in Canada and the United States.
Did you feel as you got older too, like as you got old, you matured more and you just became more comfortable in your own skin?
For
Did that play a
sure.
part?
I think it played a part, and also the learning played a major part. So my
Right.
education played a major role. And it's something that I still battle with. Like, I think that narrative will be there for a really long time, but I can overcome that now. So now that I'm in a place where I can talk about it, I do try to talk about it with like, especially like the youth in the community, or just out when I'm like, whenever I encounter these conversations, to say like, yeah, there was a time when I really hated being Indian.
As she contemplates the future of her own identity, participant Stephanie has to decide if she's ready to overcome this narrative herself. Thunder Bay, day 3. The participants enjoy breakfast after spending the night at the home of Stephanie McLaurin in Fort William First Nation.
So there's some coffee here if you want to come make yourselves a cup.
They pick up the conversation where it left off the night before.
With Canada trying to reconcile, what's often missed is the truth. So it's truth and reconciliation, and they want the reconciliation without the truth telling. So to be given this opportunity to understand that there's a huge possibility that everything you know about Indians is a lie, and that it's your job to find those and figure it out and determine for you how you feel about that.
Inspired by Stephanie's words, participant Stephanie finally finds the courage to reveal the secret that she's kept since the start of the journey.
You know, it's interesting that you say that. I have my Métis status.
Oh, okay.
I'm the first one in my family, which makes me wonder, like, even prior to their generations, was it like a taboo thing? You know, we've got to keep that hidden. We don't want people knowing about it. Why is that something that I'm just finding out now?
Samantha is floored by Stephanie's revelation.
No, honestly, I'm kind of shocked. I had no idea. Like, looking at you, I just would never have thought that. Like, I just kind of assumed someone who like visibly, you know, looked.
It was
First Nation.
visibly.
And now it's just crazy to hear like you have this huge history of that in your blood, and like that's just mind blowing. So does that change the way you like look at those communities and stuff?
Let's be real. I don't really have any tie. I had no idea even that I was Métis because it wasn't something that I grew up with. It's not something that people talk to me about. There's nothing. So for me to have like an emotional connection to something like that, I just don't.
Yeah.
Right? Like I
For certain.
just don't.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
You should just try to be really gentle with yourself, because there's like a lot, like it can be really triggering, especially when you start unpacking it. And if you're coming from the background that you were sharing, where you had all these ideas, you not only have to find out that you're Indigenous, now you have to overcome a lot of things that you believe that aren't necessarily true now about yourself. Now it's personal, right?
But for Stephanie, it isn't about connecting with her Métis heritage. It's about the so-called perks that comes with ancestry.
It wasn't until I had kids where I started thinking about it. When it comes time for them to go on to post-secondary education, will there maybe be some grants for them? Absolutely, there might be. I mean, that's definitely, without a doubt, a perk for them.
For sure. And I think that we also have to be really careful with how we use the word perk, because in order for your children to get that, they have to be so far removed from it. So is it really a perk when
that's fair.
Historically you're maybe getting back something that you should have always had? There's very little perks when we think about what should have been and now what we have to go get in order to fight for some of those injustices that we face. You have a great opportunity in front of you to learn a lot about your past, to begin to unpack a lot of things that you might have carried for the last 35 years. Now that's your lens, right? So whereas before it was outside looking in, now you're inside looking out.
The traveler's time in Thunder Bay is nearly up. Stephanie is left with a lot to reflect on. She's starting to realize that reconnecting with her Métis heritage goes much deeper than she first thought.
Because of my newfound background, the last 2 weeks, I've been taking a lot of it in and really sitting with it because of what I've found out, right? Like, there's so much information that I had no idea about. I want to know more just because I never had the parents to talk to about it, the aunts and uncles, the grandparents, because they never talked about it. Maybe it was the fact that they didn't want me to identify as having Métis or Aboriginal ancestry because they didn't want me to have that stigma attached to me. That's fair, but I'm not okay with that.
The group's time in Thunder Bay is over. And for 4 of the 6 travelers, the next leg is much closer to home, Southern Ontario.
Yeah, I don't know anything about like what the Indigenous area could be around here. Do you guys know anything? I guess not.
Mississauga-based Brennan hopes the next experience will finally give the answers he's seeking.
Why is there so much abuse of alcohol and drugs? Why? I know that there is. They say, well, the parents are doing it. Okay, why are the parents doing it? Is it a cultural thing of abuse? What is the link to all this?
As they approach Larry's hometown of Brantford, he's intrigued.
Being from the area, I've never actually sat down with an Indigenous person and discussed their concerns from their perspective.
What the 6 don't know is that they're heading to the Woodland Cultural Center. Formerly the Mohawk Institute, it was home to Canada's longest continuously operating residential school. Today, the neighboring 6 nations of the Grand River Reserve has transformed it into an interpretive learning center. But for Lori, the thought of residential schools is tied only to the financial settlements the federal government gave survivors.
They got a lot of money and it turned into a shit show. That's just all you hear. That's just all you hear. Residential school, residential school, residential school. That drives me nuts.
She's about to get a whole new perspective on how deep the effects of residential schools still are.
Good morning. Welcome.
Kaylee Rubin is a cultural interpreter at the Woodland Cultural Center.
Residential schools were put in place to take children out of their Indigenous communities, take away their ceremony, their culture, their language, their identity. This went on right until 1996. This was called aggressive assimilation by the people that were in power. We're gonna see the dormitories of the kids, the basement, the hallways where the kids couldn't even go to at some of them. So just watch your step when we go in, and we'll follow me up this way.
Under extensive renovations, the building is closed to the public. The tour offers a rare glimpse inside one of Canada's darkest chapters.
Kids were here as young as 4. They kept the sexes separate and made sure that if you had siblings that you were also removed from them as well. So complete breakdown of family dynamics. This was a dormitory for boys aged 4 to 7. So boys, they could have up to 20, 30 boys in this room, bunk beds all kind of along the wall. But this is a heavy place. You could imagine these kids going to sleep every night listening to kids cry or watching abuse happen, you know, across the room from you. A lot of isolation, a lot of loneliness, a lot of grief.
And it closed in 1970, you said?
70. Yeah.
That's so recent.
So recent.
My parents were alive.
I was 13.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the basement where the most deplorable incidents occurred.
So this whole area is what is called boys' playroom. So this is where they would put, you know, up to 70, 80 kids at a time, right here, unsupervised, no staff, because this was a time that the staff could do whatever they wanted. However, children that were being subject to abuse day in and day out, they were pretty sad, pretty angry. Oftentimes they took that out on each other. So learning that kind of behavior, they would actually square off around those poles, and it would become like a human boxing ring.
Did any of the staff ever call out about this, or?
No, they encouraged it.
Kaylee takes the 6 to the laundry room, a place that had a far more sadistic use.
This was also a place of punishment. Staff would get boys out of their bed in the middle of the night, and they were made to fight until either one of those children were passed out. Further down that hallway, off the dining hall, there's the boiler room. That was a place where staff, male staff, would take young children to sexually abuse them. They would take them to the boiler room because it was so loud that it would actually drown out the screams and the cries of those kids. So being in the basement, it definitely was a place where they could do those things to kids.
For the 6, hearing what went on here is inconceivable.
How do you guys feel being in this space?
There's like no words.
Right?
Soon, the 6 will meet some of the survivors from this very school. At the Woodland Cultural Center, site of one of Canada's longest continuously running residential schools, the participants meet with survivors to learn about their experiences here.
Hello. Lori.
Stephanie.
Lori.
The women sit down with sisters Dawn and Roberta Hill.
Hi there.
Hi.
And the men with Bud White-Eye.
Larry.
Bud.
Pleasure to meet
Jackson.
you, Bud.
Hi, Jackson.
So I understand you went here?
Yeah. Yeah. It's story time. In the summer of '55, I was coming home from my grandmother's house, and a black car pulled alongside of us. We were on that side of the road, and the man yelled, "Would you like a ride?" I told my older brother, "What do we do?" And he said, "We just keep walking." Soon enough, the man said, "We can get you some ice cream or jelly or whatever you like." And my brother talked to me again. He said, "Let's get in and maybe they'll leave us alone." We were just little guys. I mean, they're talking about 6 to 11 years old. Sure enough, they bought us some ice cream. And then they said, "Well, let's go." And they didn't say, "Let's go home." They said, "Let's go." I remember watching the cornfields go by and wheat fields and stuff like that. The car pulled in there and we walked up the steps where he was leading us and took us in the front door. He started asking me how old I was, what my name is or was. He asked me what grade I was in school. I never thought till later that if this was organized, he would have already had my name and what grade I was in and things like that. He would have already had it. So all I could conclude is that those people that picked us up must have kidnapped us.
It was so impersonal, like a lot of our lives there. Like nothing was really yours. You know, like we had numbers, like we knew what our numbers were. And the officers quite often didn't call us by our name. They called us by our number. So if they wanted me to come over and talk to them, number 54, come here. I still remember my number. Hers was 34. And so you learn to kind of be impersonal. I don't know how that happens, but it just did.
I remember I was in the basement. I'm not sure if I was 7 or 8 at that time. And one of the little girls said, "Your mom's here." I just stood there and I couldn't move. I was like frozen and I cried and I cried and I was so hurt. And the little girl saying, "Don't you like your mother?" Well, of course I like my mother. I just I could not, I think emotionally, I couldn't handle going up there again. I couldn't handle going up there again and having to deal with this, you know, the age that you're at, the trauma that you have to go through. It's saying goodbye and not having the only person in our world that really gave 2 hoots about us and that loved us was our mother, you know? And then after a while, that other little girl said, "If you don't go, your mother's going to leave you." So I took off running. I went upstairs. I went and sat with my mom. And all I did was cry, cry, cry. And then the next thing that I remember sitting in the office across from Skin, like we called the minister's Skin. That was I remember sitting in his office and sitting on his lap. And that's where he didn't comfort me. He didn't give me any comfort saying, you know, talking about my mom and how much I missed her. He started to fondle me. He sexually assaulted me in that office, you know. And I really, as a child, you don't know. We don't know what, I had no clue what he was doing. Absolutely no clue what he was doing until he overpowered me. And so after that, I knew the control and the power he had over any kid, what he could do to you.
Was anyone ever held accountable, like for anything that happened? Like anyone was prosecuted at all?
No, they were
nothing.
By the time there was some interest by the government and other people, these guys were either dead or in nursing homes. The last guy was in a nursing home when they tried to interview him, and he blamed everybody else. He blamed this officer and that officer. He was squeaky clean, but he wasn't. I know he wasn't. He was in my bed. I was raped several times in my bed. I don't know what time at night, but it was always at night. The first time a guy came, I was sleeping. He was on top of me. We struggled for what I thought was a long time because I was going to fight all the way. I didn't cry. I just knew some bastard did something to me. The next morning, I looked around to see if any of the boys heard anything, or nobody was looking at me. Nobody said a thing, which made me happy. I wasn't going to talk about it. It was going to be my secret till I died. Hell was created here, and I went to Vietnam when I turned 18. And the oddest thing, I preferred Vietnam to living here.
You know, today This is the first time in my life that I've ever truly felt any sort of shame towards being a Canadian. And it's not a nice feeling.
I don't want you to feel ashamed or anything about anything. I think that you sit here and talk to me, that's good. You don't have to feel bad. I like to get the story out there. And it helps me too, psychologically. I feel better after I tell my story. That's all we got is to talk about it.
Listening to Bud, Dawn, and Roberta share their truths has had a profound effect on the participants. Kaylee hosts a sharing circle to reflect on the experience. Larry is still reeling from it.
What's mind-boggling for me, other than the atrocities we've just learned of, is I grew up 30 miles south of here. And now I live in Brantford. I didn't even know this place existed. Why wasn't I taught this even in school?
Do you feel like it's almost like changing the lens, you know, to what you're seeing? Like you've been seeing under a very colonial lens up until this point, you know, even the stereotypes and misconceptions you brought, all of a sudden this is putting in a new lens of how to see around you, right? How to see what's actually happened, right? The missing piece.
For Brennan, it's this missing piece that finally provides answers to the questions he's been trying to solve.
It's hard to put into words, like, because we all grew up, I think, with this conception of how great Canada is. It's still, in my opinion, still a great country. I'm not going to take that. I'm still proud to be Canadian, but it's giving me more context of to what your people have been through. Mm-hmm. And I hope to share stories of what you guys tell us with other people, hope to give them more context of what's happening.
It goes along that well, it's in the past, forget about it. But we're still living with the results of colonization. You know, we often just concentrate on the kids and the residential school and their experience, but it's also the families that were torn away from their kids, right? In an Indigenous culture, our children are the very epicenter of who we are, right? Because we're passing on that knowledge, that information. And when you take that very core, you take the very core of who a people are. And I agree that money isn't going to fix our people. It's not going to heal our people. And I don't think the government or the churches are going to heal our people. We have to heal ourselves. Because even in our own communities, residential school isn't something that's talked about. It's so hard, like what you guys went through in that school today. It's not a feeling that you want to get to all the time, maybe like to get, you know, so it's a very hard subject to talk about, but it's something that has given me personally my identity back.
As the group prepares to leave the Woodland Cultural Center, the tone is somber. Stephanie can't help but imagine losing her own children to such a place.
I've got kids, but I've got a little man at home, right? Like, and he's such a mama's boy. Like, he's so, it's hard to think that could have been him, right? Like, that could have been, it's crazy. He's 4, right? Like, it's hard.
Lori will take home what she's learned.
To witness it is to truly learn to feel emotion behind it. It gives me a different perspective when I go back home in my community, to be a little more compassionate with the people back there and what they've been through.
And Larry can't believe these atrocities happened right in his own backyard.
30 miles from here, this was going on when I was a kid. No, I didn't have a clue. People were saying it was pretty bad. I never thought it was this bad. Not even close. Not even close.
The travelers' views on residential schools has been forever changed. But where will they stand when challenged by issues happening right now.
Here in this area, it's very racist. Reverse racism can't exist.
I don't agree with that.
The hate is just lashing back and forth.
We do not label them.
Justice for Colton is about the mistreatment of Indigenous people historically in Canada.
Where are you in all of this then? Why aren't you speaking up?
Welcome back. So that was Changing the Lens, episode 2 of season 2 of First Contact. It's a little bit hard to watch. It's definitely a conversation starter.
Yeah.
And, you know, Taylor and I were sitting here and wondering, what changing the lens, what does that mean? How do we do that?
Well, like as you said, you know, I get very emotional when I watch this show, and as a third generation residential school survivor, I still feel that trauma from when my grandmother was in residential school, and I lost culture. I was never raised in culture, right? I never had the language and things like that. So some of the things that I just do personally is I'm just immersing myself in culture through school, through post-secondary school, which is great. But I think one of the things that we need to do as a group of people is not to be afraid to have these conversations, these open conversations with residential school survivors. Give them the time to share their stories, to educate those who may not understand exactly the trauma and the pain that went through behind those doors, but also, you know, take the time to read those calls to action, those 94 calls to action that the TRC has released, because they share so much on how we can move forward as a nation in reconciliation, or reconciliation is another term that I hear a lot of people use, right? So, and then also just embrace and immerse the culture, right? You're in Canada, there's First Nations all over the place that are having ceremonies and all these types of things. Experience it, learn about it. I can't explain our culture. You really need to be involved in it.
Exactly. Not be afraid. You know, Belinda is joining us via Zoom, as she's not feeling very well, but not too bad either. Belinda, do you have any thoughts that you'd like to share to open up the dialogue?
Yeah, first of all, I am a survivor of 10 years of residential school. I left my home when I was 9 years old. To this day, we don't know who made the decisions for which families to go to residential school. I was 9 years old, and I have no recollection at all of the day that I left my home. But I'm pretty sure my grandmother would have made sure that I was dressed very nice, because she made all my clothes for me. No recollection of getting on the train in the pod to go to Dauphin. Remember getting to the train station and seeing yellow buses, and no recollection of the ride to the Mackay School. Arriving there and seeing people in white uniforms, I thought I was going back to a tuberculosis sanatorium, and I didn't want to get off that bus, and I fought very hard not to get off the bus. I have then no recollection at all of getting off that bus and going into the school. And so a lot of this, you know, very, very much hits home for me. The whole thing hits home. The whole racism, the judgments, all of that has affected every Indigenous person in this country. No one was immune to the actions of the people in this country called Canada. Okay, and as you could tell by the stories, by the people that went on that journey to visit schools and reserves, It's not like we don't know that that happens. Even today, that happens every day. And for people to say, such things as get over it and, quit taking this and quit whatever. First of all, to know our history is to know who you are. And to know who you are is the first step to making change in your life as the individual. In my life, I've been sober 46 years, going on 47 years now. That was 1975 when I woke up and starting to wake up and becoming aware. 76, I started to learn about my history and our way of life. And it really, I have to say that it really pissed me off. Probably not a good word for a grandmother to use, but there you go. Because it made me angry. So first of all, we lived here for thousands and thousands of years. We don't have to confirm that with anybody. That's just the way it's been. 500 years ago, when the contact was made with newcomers coming into our land, our country, from another country who knew nothing at all, absolutely nothing of who we are as a people and our way of life and our way of thinking, because we do think differently. We are Innu. We are the descendants of the original people of this country. And whether we realize it or not, we do think differently because of how our lives have been impacted by the thoughts and judgments of other races of people to our country. Do you think that we wanted to be on reserves? Do you think that we wanted numbers given to us to tell us who we are? Do you think that we wanted to be on reserve? We don't even have a word for reserve at all. It had to be made up. And so to think, and then a government who deliberately, by law, says that I, as an Indigenous person, Innu, cannot be who I am. White people across Canada here never, ever have to not be who they are, especially by our government of today. So you tell me how all of that is okay today. 500 years of having to try to be someone else and then judged by the newcomers to say that our way of life, our way of living in spirit and living under the law of God, which was the only law we knew, to make judgment on my ancestors and say they worship the devil and are evil. And you know what? That lie is still here today in Canada. And now we have our own people saying the same thing to us. Of those of us who choose to believe the traditional ways of our ancestors, I will never betray from. And even though I was gone to residential school, I know my language. I know my Innu way of thinking because I was born into it and I grew up in it and I spoke my language until I was 9 years old. I'm taken away. So how many people do you know across Canada who's had their children come taken from them just for the sake of taking the, what is it? What would it be? The whiteness out of you? That doesn't happen. And the hard truth is that is what happened. And that's what we're now living, the disconnections and separate. Family was all we had before contact. That was our whole system. Rites of passages have not been happening for hundreds of years. Those were the things that told us who we are and who we are to be as we're growing up and what our roles are in this world. I am a carrier of the Innu way of life and thinking. And I don't need anybody's permission to do that. I know who I am. Oh, of course I could go on and on, but anyway.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Belinda. I understand, Miigwech. I don't mean to be, we have a few questions and, one of the questions that is asked is if this was filmed before or after the ground x-rays, which have finally provided proof to the mass killings of Indigenous children across Canada. First Contact, the series, was done prior to the graves that were located. So it was prior, it wasn't, the show was done in 2019 and 18, I believe. Another question we have is, do we have any recommendations on how to start the conversation with our friends and families who come to reconciliate and think about Indigenous folks in the same way as the 6 in the episode? How do you start? And I think we just had that conversation with Belinda and Taylor, and how do we start moving forward? I'm hoping that answered that question. There's a question that we mentioned. You mentioned listen to stories of survivors. How would we do that? How can we access the folks who are willing to share their stories in a respectful way? The Truth and Reconciliation website, I believe, has the stories of the survivors that you can actually listen to. But it's also, I think, another way to listen to the survivors is take the time to ask the questions, not ask questions, but take the time to speak to each other.
Outreach, right? Doing some outreach within your own business, within your own organization or corporation. I'm sure that there's Indigenous representatives that you could approach to ask them if they know of some elders who would be willing to share their stories with them, right? So I think that would be great.
That'd be a great idea. Belinda, we have a question maybe that you can help answer. We have a question. How can someone move forward if we don't acknowledge what happened and admit what is wrong?
Thanks for that question, Javier. I did want to say earlier that there's a group of people that started by Raymond Curry. It's called Circles for Reconciliation. He started this a few years ago already, and it gets 10 people together, 5 Indigenous, 5 non-Indigenous, and they come together for an hour, 1 week, 10 weeks, and they get to share their stories, and they get to know each other. Because if we don't talk to each other, nothing is going to change, right? I mean, you have to hear me, I have to hear you, and we're going to have a difference of opinion on how we see things. But let me just say as well, if it has not been your experience to have gone through what we did, then really, I don't think that you have any right to make judgments on what is happening now. Because if you knew the history, if you knew that the government deliberately separated you from your family, imagine all of you that are listening right now at this moment, that someone comes knocking on your door this afternoon to say, I am taking your child away today. And they're not going to come back. They might come back in the summertime for the summer holidays, but they'll be gone for 10 years. And I just want you to know that and be aware of that. So how does that feel? You know, like, think about that. Do you really think we wanted to be taken away from our families? Do you really think that our families wanted to give us up willingly? No, because if they didn't, their rations or their welfare was taken from them. And people say, why do they have reserves? We didn't want them in the first place, okay? But so really, when you take people out of a system that they're used to, which was living off the land and surviving on the land, off the land, and then you put them in a place, 6,000, 500,000, they were just taken into places they call reserves. And they took away your ability to hunt and fish. And they first had to put laws in place as to when you, as the individual who was used for their whole life as adults, to look after their own families. We don't have a word for welfare. We don't know those systems. That was not our systems. So you need to start talking to one another. Think about, live from your spirit. This is what we knew really well, was to live from our spirit under the law of God. Now religion plays a whole different role and tears people apart when you think that if we are living under the law of God, all of us, no matter what religion you believe, then something is wrong. There's something wrong with our thinking. So live from your spirit, think from your spirit, and things will change in this whole country and this whole world if you could do that for a few minutes or every day of your life, which I choose to do.
Miigwech, thank you very much, Belinda. Thank you. We have a question asking, would it be appropriate to volunteer my time at my local friendship center? I'm not Indigenous, but really would like to do whatever I can to support and be a good ally.
Absolutely.
We would definitely,
100%.
I think everybody would agree, right, Belinda? We all agree.
Yes,
Volunteering at the friendship
absolutely,
center,
absolutely.
You know, it's a great idea. You know, being
Yeah.
part of the community is what we also encourage as Indigenous people.
Exactly. Yeah,
Community is important.
Yeah, that's one of those steps towards moving forward, right, in our future. So like having non-Indigenous people coming in and taking the time, volunteering their time to learn and to work in friendship centers or community centers, like I think that's welcomed. Like
It
it's
is.
highly welcomed. And from a post-secondary perspective, I wish we had a lot more Indigenous inclusion in that system as well. I've had a couple moments in the university environment of trying to get more Indigenous inclusion in the environmental sector. So yeah, I say go for it.
Awesome, thank you. So question in regards to this particular school, I guess that was highlighted in the video. Where did the children go? Back to their families, to another school? That, a lot of times when we left residential school, I too am a survivor of residential school. I attended, and when I finished residential school, I went back to my home on the reserve. I lived with my grandparents. So depending on the age when we left the school, some of us went back to our families, and some of us matured out of residential school and left the community or stayed in the community. It varied. You know, Belinda, when you left residential school, did you go home? Did you go back to your community? Where did you go?
I did go back home to my community, and then, but in 1960, I think it was 64, 65, because I also grew up with my grandparents at Big 80 Reserve, and I was raised by them. And then my dad died in 1958, and my mother remarried 2 years later, went up to Churchill. So we started going up there in the summertime. So that's where I spent most of my adult life. And I got married there and had children there, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. There's a question again from the participants asking, is there anything tangible that they can do today? What would you suggest? We'll stay with you, Belinda, maybe. What would you suggest that somebody could do today to be an ally, to something tangible they can do to help?
Yeah, I mean, my idea always is that you must talk to each other, okay? Because you can't expect to make change if you're not interacting with people. So I think even just checking out where in your territories that you live in, you are able to assist in anything. Even you know, like some people have gathered together, for example, to make moccasins and to do some beadwork, and even white men were involved. You know, so almost any activity that would bring people together, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, in any way, you can invite people into your organization and say, let's have a sharing circle once a week and bring in a different speaker, or just have an activity, because when things are relaxed in that way, there's a lot that can be shared without fear of anything. Because I do understand the people's fear of speaking to Indigenous people or being afraid to be around them, as the one guy said in the show. So, you know, you have to get to know one another to to not be fearful of each other. I mean, most people are good and kind people. So get to know each other, make contact with a friendship center, make an invitation. Is there an elder that can come and share with us? Can we have a Friday afternoon, you know, get together for an hour or so, and just to know one another and to meet each other? I think it's just, you have to speak to each other, for sure.
Okay, thank you. And you know, if you don't mind, Taylor, do you have anything you want to add
do.
to that? You
I do. I would like to just share with you that things that you can do today is join Indigenous movements. There's so many from coast to coast. On the West Coast, we have our Wet, Sweat, and Strong, our brothers and sisters over there who are fighting pipelines. On the East Coast, we've got the Micmac and the fisheries. Right here in Manitoba, where we're located on Treaty 1, our relatives up north are fighting hydro dams. So there's a lot of different proactive things that you could do in that way. And the more people that we have at these protests or at these assemblies and all these things, like, be an ally.
Yeah,
that's another good way. Join Facebook groups, Instagram, if you're a big social media users, and support Indigenous owned businesses.
Exactly. I think a lot of times what happens is a lot of people don't understand the issues that are happening.
Yeah.
And there's a misconception about what we are fighting for or what we are arguing for. You know, you still hear the term, get over it.
Yeah.
Well, those things that happen to us growing up is something that stays with us our entire life. So when you understand the situations that are happening in the communities, urban and rural, then it makes a difference in terms of having a better picture of where we are today and what's happening.
Yeah, and I think a good example of that was for Canada Day this year, for instance. Look at everything that happened throughout Canada Day and the whole, like, no pride in genocide movement that was happening. You know, there was monuments being taken down just because now finally in 2021, people are starting to listen to us. They're starting to hear our voices. As young Indigenous people, we're becoming the faces at the forefront of what we think is right and what matters, and how to get those biases removed from what we've suffered through for 150 years.
Exactly. Sorry, we're going off topic. Yeah, we'll get back to the questions, which I must say we're getting a lot of questions. So one of the other questions we have, which is a hard one to answer. Question from Beverly is, why did this continue in the 70s when this awful history was already known? Why did the parents not stop the government of the day? That one, I think I need some help, Belinda. How do you say?
Well, first of all,
you know,
understand.
How do we answer that?
Yeah, first of all, understand that these actions were taken by the government of Canada, which is your government today. Okay, that was the law 150 years ago. But even way before that, the colonization of our country was happening right from day one, just so you know that and understand that. Because the truth today is that you need to know the truth about this history. And it's uncomfortable, but being uncomfortable never hurt anybody. It just takes a few minutes and then you get over it, okay? You do get over it, really. So making the truth known about what happened in this country to the original people of this country, that is very, very important. And excuse me. Oh, just give me that. Just give me the question again. Sorry, my thought wandered for a few moments.
The question was.
Oh, why could we not do something in 1975?
I guess, how did this continue? This happened in the 70s. Why was it allowed to continue?
Okay. Fear. Absolute fear of the government. You see, to me, how I see our ancestors, we were a very humble people. We were not people that showed off things like some people do today, like Donald Trump and other people. But anyway, so we're a very humble people. Number one, first of all, never did we think that anybody that came to our country would lie. Never did we think that they would lie to us, because we are truthful people. And so when you present something like you are evil, for 500 years, people, 500 years, we've been hearing that already. That mentality has been passed down in our cell memories, in our bodies, in our minds. So that is carried on. And you know what? You have to know and understand the conscious and subconscious mind to understand how powerful negative messages can be on a human being. 500 years of that. And it's been negative messages, right? Have you ever heard a lot of positive messages about Indigenous people? Not likely, probably better now, but not in the last years. So 1975, yeah, that isn't even long ago. That's the year that I quit drinking. And then, so what happens when Indigenous people stand up for what is not right? We're the bad guys. Always, almost always, we're the bad guys. That's how people see us. So do you really think that my grandfather and grandmother, had they been alive at that time, can really stand up and say, you're not taking my granddaughter? I don't think so, because they believed what the government told them, and the government said, if you don't allow your children to come, you will go to jail. And they did put them in jail. So now you tell me, how quickly do you get over that as a parent? You don't. You carry that on. You live in fear of people coming and taking your child again. You see, that's the one thing that non-Indigenous people in this country cannot relate to. That your child was taken at the whim of the government. So again, let me come to your home today and let me just take your child. Let me just take your child. Just because the government said I could. You see, because if you don't think of those things, you're still going to come from your judgment. And that's not right. You cannot do that anymore. You have to learn the truth of this history. And then you need to ask your government, why did they do that? It's over, it's done. But in the meantime, it's a destruction. It's just like a war. It's a war on your family. It's a war on your children. People, I mean, the people that were taking care of them, anytime they wanted, could sexually abuse them, physically abuse them. How is that okay? And that happened in this country that we call Canada. So fear, and you know what? That fear is still there today. Many of our elders who are still Christian are still very fearful of them believing the lie that we're evil people. So when you believe that you're evil people, you don't like yourself very good. So when you grow up not liking who you are, not even knowing who you are or where you come from, because you have no grounded, there's nothing to ground you to who you are. You see, myself as an Indigenous woman who went for 10 years, it took me 10 years to undo that colonization in my head, because every time I said, we had our own way of life, we are not Christian people, we don't come from Jerusalem. So it took me that long. 10 years is how long I went, because I kept thinking, oh no, I'm going to go to hell. For sure I am. So that mentality is still there, and that's fear, and that's wrong. So I share the story to elders in my language and ask them to this day, face to face. So you really believe your ancestors, your mom and dad, grandfather, grandmother were evil? You could still believe that in 2021? No. Our elders cannot go to their next place in this universe believing they're no good or evil. But they do. They still do. And that's a sad part of our history today. It's still here. Our young people have no idea who they are. They don't know where they come from. And until you wake up to that, nothing will change for yourself. I mean, see, my life is about helping people become aware and to make change. Because I wouldn't want people to be where I was years ago. I hated myself, especially when I drank. Not anymore, not today. I love myself. I love who I am. And I know that I come from God. And I live from that every day. And I honor that every day. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Belinda. Greatly appreciate your perspective and experiences because they help us understand. And I'm very thankful. You're okay.
Yeah.
It is a very hard conversation, and it's a conversation that I know we have a hard time talking about. We have a hard time sharing. We have a hard time listening to, and we have to adapt. We have to learn to share our stories. We have to learn to be okay, because the next generation coming behind us have to carry on our stories, they have to carry on our legacies of where we were and how we were treated. I'm a grandmother of 12. I am a mother of 4. And I'm also in the process of teaching my family, my young ones coming behind me, of what has happened in my life. And it's a little hard, it's a little hard, but we have survived and we will continue to survive. Back to our questions. So, sorry. So another question. During the show, Kim heard it mentioned that the Indian Act makes an Indigenous person less than a person. Why does Canada still have an Indian Act? Well,
oh my God, I don't know.
Yeah,
that's a hard question to answer. I know so many people are trying to, there's like a lot of talk about abolishing the Indian Act, but then if they do, it kind of takes away some of those treaty rights that were promised to us, right? So it's like, where's that line like that we follow, right?
Exactly. So it is a very tough question with the Indian Act, because yes, it gives a lot of, there's a lot of promises when this was first made. When the treaties were first made, it was made on trust, that we trusted our co-partners of this land. Unfortunately, they didn't keep to the promise, and things changed. And I think over time, it wasn't intended to be negative. I really don't want to believe that. Where it's at today, I think we have to learn to work together to make the change, to make it better for everybody. I don't think it's something that one party can control without the help of everybody.
Exactly.
Maybe I'm wrong. Belinda, what are your thoughts on the Indian Act and why we still have it? Is it something we should keep, or why? What are your thoughts, Belinda?
Oh my God, I got a million thoughts on that one. First of all, have to know that there is no White Act or any other nationality act in Canada, but there was also the Gradual Civilization Act, which was meant for Indigenous people. So the circumstances are very, very different. I don't think that when you have to think about what was the goal of the situation of that time. Okay, the goal of the government, first of all, was to take the land. That's what they wanted. And so, and land was taken by settlers as well, just clearly taken. And so I guess the government felt that somehow they needed to be responsible for taking the land that they did to serve their purpose. So putting together the Indian Act, definitely. So when you have to really definitely think that this is just a weird way of thinking of things, okay? Back in those days. So when when you want to take something away from somebody, you give something in return. That's reciprocity. In my way of thinking, it's called a spiritual contract. But you have to be of spiritual mind and intent to do that. I don't know that there was spiritual intent at that time. So when these things were made up for the government to provide all these things for the land that they were going to take for what they wanted for the railway and all of that across Canada, I don't think that they thought through the whole process at all. But given when you are put in a reserve, which was unheard of before, what did you think? And how did you think those people, our people, were going to provide for themselves? Because you've already taken away their hunting rights and they can only do that in certain parts of the season. Their fishing rights were taken. So all those things, so you now are taking away their livelihood, if you ask me. And yes, you are now providing to say, I will provide this, 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 and that, which is still there in the Indian Act. So, but is the intent still the same today? That, is it equal? Are we equal in the eyes of the people in Canada? No, we're not. Because circumstances have been different in how things were, and I'm going to use the word taken from us. Our way of life, our way of living, our identity was taken by the government. So circumstances are very different. But let me tell you, I don't believe that my ancestors would have wanted to live on the reserve. I think that they would have wanted to be free in their own country to live where they chose to live. Unlike when the veterans went to war, our veterans went to war, Métis, First Nation, Inuit, a Métis veteran had to give up his farm and his home to a white settler when they came back from war. How is that fair? It happened. Many of our people, their lands were taken from them, even when it was theirs. So the circumstances have always been very different in this country for Indigenous people. We are not treated equally. We're seen as, always taken from the government. And really, you've taken our lives, government. You've taken our lives and shredded them, separated us. People today don't even know their families. So treaties, were they given in true giving and receiving? Because, for example, today there's things that are not in the Indian Act anymore, where Innu people were, nobody asked any of the people across Canada to take out some of the things they have in the Indian Act, for example, and those treaties. And tell me, who's slow in this country? Why are we waiting 125 years for a treaty land settlement? I don't think it's us. But so I think asking your government a lot of these questions would be helpful, and you can be our ally on that in getting these circumstances dealt with, even. So it's hard to say because you can't foresee what could have happened back then, but I do think one thing. I think that in the beginning of contact, had the newcomers and settlers sat down and really asked how our life was and how we lived our lives and how we did things and how we shared things, life would be different today. But you see, even when you heard me speaking my language and saying the prayers, did you know anything I was saying? No. So consider that in the beginning. We don't have, there's a lot of words we don't have in our language. Like we don't have a word for religion, for example, And so there's all kinds of things that I now know as a Innu, proud Innu woman, that I am aware, I am awake, I will always teach, and I will always wake up people wherever I can. And so, and my grandson here is one of those people who's going to know who they are.
Miigwech, thank you very much, Belinda. That was beautifully said. I want to turn back to the questions for a minute, and we have one that I think is going to generate a good discussion. So can we talk about land back and how it's connected to reconciliation?
I actually really like this question. I get asked this a lot about land back as a environmental student and a land guardian and water protector, but so land back, like it's a big thing that's going on around right now with the like hashtag and all these things that you see. But to me, I think it's kind of used a little too loosely. Our lifestyle is land-based as it is, right? So the fact that this is starting to come about now is kind of odd to me, just because I've always been a land-based person. So, but I think how it's related to reconciliation is giving stewardship back to Indigenous peoples, allowing us to take care of our lands the way that we see fit, environmental monitoring, biodiversity, conservation, food sovereignty, sustainability. I think that is what land back can mean towards reconciliation and what we can do. Some of the work that I do in Broken Head, which is my home community, is we just started a project called Kittikay, which is bringing back wild rice paddies back into the Broken Head River, and just those types of things. That's what land back means to me, and that's how it can be used towards reconciliation, is giving the land is what we based our lives off of before contact, and that's the first thing that was taken from us. So giving it back would be one of the biggest steps towards reconciliation.
Miigwech, I love, perfect answer.
Thank you.
I don't need to add to that. Question and statement. Thank you for the opportunity of a dialogue. It is an opportunity to ask and answer questions without being judgmental. How important are Indigenous languages, and how would you like them to be in Canada in the context of the two official languages? Wow.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great question. Why don't you answer that? No,
how do I answer that one? It is a great question. And in the context of the two official languages, well, I don't speak French, and I speak fluently Ojibwe. How would I would love if we have, I think, 73 Indigenous languages across this country.
Yeah.
So it's a little hard to try and put it into the context that you're asking of the two official languages. I think being respectful and recognizing that we do have our own languages and allowing us the opportunity to share it, I think is the first door to opening that discussion. Indigenous language is being lost across this country. There are way more than 73 languages. And I know there's some of them that are lost, and we're trying to revive them. Schools are now, opening up and teaching Ojibwe and Cree. Michif is a very beautiful language that has been lost. And it's
like I see at the university level, they're finally offering Ojibwe and Cree classes and then you can also it's not a major though, and that's one of the things that we're trying to push for at the U of M or at the University of Manitoba, is trying to allow students to major and get a degree in their language. So I think that would be a great step to see that move forward, that idea. I would love to see that, and I don't know if I'll see it in my time as a student. I'm almost done. So, but it would be great.
Be your time before mine, though.
Yeah.
We have another question from Angela. When was the last residential school closed? And we actually had to do a little bit of research. I knew it was in 1996 and it was in Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan was the last residential school in Gordon, Saskatchewan, 1996, which is horrible to think about. That's not very long ago.
No, that's what's scary.
Vera,
It is.
if I
And,
could,
not knowing that, but my daughter was born in 1990. In 1996, had we been still under the same processes as when I was 6, my daughter would have been in residential school. I'm so thankful that my children, none of my children had to go there.
Yeah.
Vera.
Another
Vera?
question. Thoughts on the creation of the Day of Truth and Reconciliation? And not to turn it entirely political, but some comments on the actions of the PM. Where can we go from here? I'm going to turn to Belinda. I think Belinda has something that she wants to add. Sorry. And maybe
That's
you
okay.
can, Belinda, maybe you can give us an answer on that.
Okay, just say that the question again.
Thoughts on the creation of the Day of Truth and Reconciliation. What are your thoughts about September 30th being recognized as the Day of Truth and Reconciliation?
Okay, thank you. Yeah. First of all, I just want to say before I answer that as a speaker, as someone who was born into their language and then lost it over the years in residential school and realized that it was up to me to get my language back, which I did, and I ended up teaching it at the U of M back in 1996. The languages of this country are very important because when you speak your language, there's a connection within your spirit to that language and to that way of thinking. And I always said to my students, when you're learning a new language, you got to feel the word. You have to feel the word. Otherwise, it's just a word. So for me, knowing your language is very, very important. And any way that you can learn it is wonderful. So I agree with that language. I don't think that our languages will ever be like other, the 3rd, 4th, 10th language in the government of Canada. I don't think it'll happen in my lifetime. But anyway, but coming back to the National Truth and Reconciliation Day, I think first of all, I was very, very honored as a survivor that there is a day now that is ours to remember and to honor all those who are living and all those who have lost their lives and those who never came back. That it is now in our country to know what happened and that we are still here, and to remember that time. To me, that was very, very important. I was up in Split Lake at the time, and I really was trying to find my dress that I had made for that day, and I can't find it anyway. But so that is very, very important. I think it marks a very important path in our recovery, in our healing and acknowledgement, because acknowledgement is very important. If you don't acknowledge certain things in life or certain people in life, then it pretty much, you're just going kind of on a, those escalators that you walk on the airport, at the airport, where you don't have to walk, you just move. So it's important, I think, that people be recognized, and that residential schools are, we did not ask to be taken from our parents. For all of you that are listening out there, remember, the government is who decided to take us away from our fathers, mothers, grandfathers, grandmothers, aunts, uncles, and cousins. That was our life, and it was taken just like that. So that National Truth and Reconciliation Day, I'm very, very happy that it is here in Canada.
Belinda, thank you very much. We are starting to get some questions that I really want to get to, so I may put one or two together because they're in the same theme. And one of them is, how can I participate in my local school division to ensure our children will be taught the true history of our country? And with that one, there's also a question as members. No. It's okay, we'll stay with that one first. How can someone participate in their local school division to ensure that children are taught the true history?
Maybe like conversing with their teachers, with the school boards. I know that there are some, I'm not sure about Canada-wide, but in Manitoba here, we have school divisions such as Frontier and MF NERC that are really starting to add those into curriculum. So I think maybe starting a petition with like your fellow parents who really want to get that. I'm not sure. I don't have kids, so I don't know what they teach in school, in grade schools, if they teach the history, Indigenous history as extensively as I'd like it to be.
So then on that note, what do you think is the most important thing that non-Indigenous kids should be taught at home to learn about truth and reconciliation?
I think that they should be taught those 94 calls to action, because you know what, if you kind of like you bring light to these topics at kids at a young age, they're like sponges, right? They'll soak it all up and they'll want to be that change. I feel I've been working with Indigenous youth for over 10 years, and some of them don't even know their full history, right? Because they're going to schools outside of their communities because of the resources, right? So I think just educating them as much as possible. Like, it's a learning curve for yourself as well as for your kids, right? So when it comes to the school system though, I don't feel like I know how to properly answer because I don't have the experience of being in a school since I was in school. So
I can help on that one.
Okay.
Because, the question is how, with non-Indigenous children, what do you teach them, or how do you teach them at home? Well, going to your local library, going to the Chapters bookstore, there are tons of books that are appropriate to read to young children, teaching them the different cultures, the different traditions, sharing information about how we lived, how some of us still live today, like Taylor said, living off the land. It's still a practice a lot of us do today. So you can go to the public library or a local bookstore and look at some of the Indigenous written books about Indigenous people and make that the bedtime sharing story. That's just one suggestion. I like that. Thank you. Okay, question. What are things organizers miss and that we can do better about including Indigenous folks when they are trying to make their events on general labor and workplace stuff at an AGM, town hall, seminar, etc., welcome to everyone? So what are things organizers miss when they're trying to include, I think it's what the question is, Indigenous people, or wanting to welcome everybody?
Well, I think one of the things that they miss is having Indigenous peoples in these indigenized roles. I've seen a lot of times where there's Indigenous representatives who are non-Indigenous people, and that kind of infuriates me sometimes, because there are so many smart, talented, incredible Indigenous people there that can be fulfilling these roles and who can help target those audiences, right? But and I also think that a lot of organizations should start being more inclusive when it comes to, I don't know, just say like artwork, things like that, making it appeal to Indigenous people to want to join, right?
Start including. Start including. I hope that helps. So just a minute. So another question, the issues are overwhelming. Hopefully by opening our hearts and minds, by reaching out to become an ally, we can begin to heal. We may even make lifelong friends. I think that is a great statement. And I'm really hoping that by us having this time today with you and talking, sharing, and listening, that it does help build that bridge and open up as allies. Interesting question. I'm not too sure how we will take this one on. So I'll read the question.
Okay.
Do you think the Queen should apologize and be held accountable? Restitution. She's been let off the hook while the government of the day blames everyone but themselves. We have all been willfully blind over the years and need to be held accountable. Very big question.
Yeah, I can only speak for myself on this one, and I say it's a little too late. She can do it, but there was so much time to already be able to do something like this that it should have been done years and years and years ago. And to me, it would just seem like it's fake at this point.
Belinda, what are your thoughts? You know, do you think the Queen should apologize and be held accountable?
That is a loaded question for Belinda. First of all, I was there when the Queen went down July 1st at the Legislative Building. I have to say I could hardly contain my excitement lest I be chased off the stairs of the Legislative Building. And I don't make any apologies for what I am going to say, because number one, the Queen and her merry gentlemen, as they were called back then, when they arrived here in our country, was to make her rich, and therefore to make Hudson Bay rich. Okay, understand first of all that our thinking is not the same as the newcomers when they came here. We, our ancestors, did not think in terms of thousands of pelts. It was not in our scope of thinking. As people who are stewards of the land, as stewards of this land, we still know how to take care of the land. They knew back then how to take care of the land. And all they ever took from the land was what they needed. Thinking in terms of thousands and millions at the end of it all was just mind-boggling. Again, the thinking is different. We took only what we needed from this land so that we could survive, into the future. So even then already that thinking was very different. And the Queen decided from her throne in England to just give this land to her merry gentlemen, the fur traders, just to give it. So that for me, I just have no respect for that at all. But that's how it happened. And the Queen did become very rich. And the descendant today is still very rich. Now, there's supposed to be a document somewhere in history that says that there was an agreement between the Queen and the Indigenous people to this country, that there was supposed to be a 60-40, 60 of course being the Queen's, and 40% of all wealth was to be shared with the Queen and with the, I'm going to say Inuit people. I don't even like the word Indigenous, by the way. Neither do I like Native, Indian, First Nations, or any of those terms. And so that agreement was made. Somewhere along the way, it got lost. And I don't know where it is today. But they say that it is said that we are collecting his interest from that money that was made back then. So I think that the government today needs to show us those documents, because they are there somewhere, but they're not being followed, that's for sure. So to just give our land over to her merry gentlemen of the day back then is not right. That is totally wrong. And this Queen today should be paying up for that agreement. She's the one with the richest today. And that was an agreement made 500 years ago. So, yeah, I don't know if the Queen will ever apologize for anything, just like the Pope. They're not ever going to apologize. If they do, I don't see it as being meaningful at all. And you know, when people talk about indigenizing things, do you know what that means? Like who came up with that word? But what does it mean? I got really excited because I'm thinking, oh my God, we're going to indigenize everything? Isn't that awesome? Because that means we have to start living from our spirit. And how many people are ready to do that? Not many, even our own. And so then we have organizations as such who run supposedly healing traditional programs for our children in CFS care. And there's white people making the rules that you can't do this and you can't do that, you can't smudge, you can't have ceremony. Like the colonizer is still giving the instructions? No. So, and I agree with Taylor, you know, why do you have non-Indigenous people in Indigenous roles? We're the ones that know. And so, yeah. I'm not sure that the Coon will.
I know
sorry,
there's
go ahead.
so much more to be said, but we're getting close to being finished here.
Yeah.
It's already 5 to 2, and I know
right.
Thank you, Belinda. I absolutely love your answer. And we're coming close to being finished, wrapping up. There are so many more questions. I really wish we could get to all of them. I would like to actually bring back your Indigenous representative, Greg. He has a few words I believe he'd like to say before we finish. Greg, are you there? Hi. It's over to you.
Jesse, thank you very much, Melinda, and I am so pleased with the attendance so far today and the discussion and the open-candidness that Belinda brings, and our youth Taylor as well. We have only a couple more minutes, so maybe we could probably veer go back to just a couple of other questions, and then we can wrap it up in a few minutes, and I'll say the last few closing remarks right at the very end. I think I just wanted to jump in earlier on some of the questions as to how people can get involved. With attending today, you're started to get involved. This is what Truth and Reconciliation is all about, is having these frank conversations and listening to people that were there and that experienced the residential schools, and to bring an awareness of what it means to be Indigenous and to have understanding of that culture. I know myself, I've started to participate here locally in Ottawa. They have the Wabano Center has, and with COVID, they've been able to actually put a lot of their sessions virtually. So there's a lot of Zoom calls that a lot of the Indigenous centers are putting on. So I really encourage people to look for those types of events and to participate. But yes, just before we wrap up, maybe we can go back to one more question or two more questions in the chat, and then we'll wrap it up.
Miigwech, Greg. I don't know how much more we can really take. We're pretty much at the end of our session. I'll grab one more question. Will all the trauma of the trauma the site brought those who attended and survivors still going through, would it not be better to tear down the building, build a new interpretive center on the site? I'll quickly answer that one, because that's something that I've been quite involved with, and I think you may even know some of this with the University of Manitoba, where the Truth and Reconciliation is.
Yeah.
The communities where the residential schools were housed are turning the residential schools into museums, and some of them are choosing to tear down the buildings and make parks and seating area.
I don't know if I for me, I think, you know, it's such a big part of our history and Canada's history that I don't think it would be best to tear them all down, because it's kind of like destroying it, like it's forgetting about it sort of. And I know it's like a very hurtful place to be and things like that, but that's that's how we came to be where we are today, right? So
true.
So I'm not I never went to residential school, so I'm sure like you and Belinda definitely have different perspectives on it than I do. But for me, it's like a monument, right, in history. So
true,
but it's hard to say.
And we do have the Truth and Reconciliation Center that you can also access online if you want to learn more. It's unfortunate it went by very fast, but we are at 2:00 now. It is the end of the day for us here, and I know everybody is going to be reflecting and thinking and talking. But on our end, I just really want to say a huge thank you to Belinda for taking part and a blessing and sharing her experiences. Our thanks also to Taylor for being here and participating and answering questions. And on behalf of APTN, I really want to say thank you to PIPS and all its members who were there and asking questions. I'm very honored to have been a part of this, and I look forward to what the future holds. I hope everybody has a really good day and
thank you
reflects
very
positively.
Thank you, Niwin, Miigwech, merci. Thank you very much, Vera, and to all the APTN staff behind the scenes. I know it took a lot of work for us to get here today. I'd also like to thank our special guests, their Elder Belinda and our Youth Taylor, for speaking the truth and joining us today as well. Wow, what a great session and webinar. I hope everybody also appreciated it. We'd also like to thank you all for participating today and joining APTN and the Indigenous, the Institute on a journey of path and truth and reconciliation. The topic may have been uncomfortable for some of you to hear, and if you're hearing it for the first time, we encourage you to seek assistance if required. You can do this by using the Employee Family Assistance Program or EAP program. It's okay not to be okay. We're all facing the up and downs of life during this pandemic and discovering the residential schools and the truth of Canadian history. The EAP program is a tool to support you. We encourage you to use it if required. On behalf of the Institute, I'd personally like to take the time to thank PC Yukon Regional Director Robert McDonald, President Debbie Davio, and the PIPS Board of Directors and the PIPS staff for all of their work over the last few years and their commitment on moving forward towards truth and reconciliation. I'd also like to recognize the partnership that we've been fostering and building upon with APTN Andrea Grassi and all of the staff at APTN over the last years. It has been a wonderful experience. PIPS has been one of the sponsors of the APTN Indigenous Day Live IDL event since June 2019, and it has been my complete honor to be working with such professionals. If you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to contact me directly or email the PIPS bettertogether@pips.ca. Niwin, Miigwech, merci. Thank you for joining us.